Hello and welcome everyone, it is me, the Lover, also known as Support to do this back for you with some Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel. With a couple replays from the 2010 tryout event. Let me move up the top here. First couple of replays will be with a Dimensional Alchemist Sky Scourge deck, something you could probably refer to as Chaos at Home. Running a lot of, good stuff, Light Fairies and Dark Fiends to set up the Sky Scourges, which are basically, counterparts to some of the old Chaos monsters. My opponent is on the Hero Loner deck. I think all of these replays are actually against the Loners, mainly because, not a whole lot of people are crafting cards for this event in my experience. And also the Loners are, pretty solid, I'd say, especially because, competitive decks for the time, of course, myself. Opponent drops a big Miracle Fusion here for an Elemental Hero. The Shining is, of course, a main difference to this. From Edison, you do have quite a couple more Hero Fusions at your disposal that you can make. Battle Fader hits the board here, kind of a card that I've become a huge fan of, actually, because I've played it in, a deck list that is very similar to this one that I'm currently playing in Edison. Gets you, a battle phase skipped, essentially, and then you have, for a Monarch on the follow-up, which is of course insane, as the Kaius just kind of draws like a bottomless out of my opponent, also outs the Shining for me, which is quite nice. Yeah, kind of forgetting that I have to Tragodia here, because I can't trigger Gauss, which was the main one I wanted to drop down here, as I just kind of, inconspicuously pass my turn again. Opponent drops down a Skyscraper, sets a monster, and punches it again with a Neos Alias as I, finally decide to actually drag here. Kind of like a neat part about this, because, I've been wanting to play this deck because of this guy specifically, Dimensional Alchemist, a very interesting card for this period of time. I'm probably going to have a bit of a talk about that guy in the deck profile. But allows you to banish the top card of your deck to gain 500 till the end phase, and if he is destroyed and sent to grave, you can add one of your banished monsters back to your hand, which has, of course, a great bit of natural synergy with a couple cards. You saw the Battle Fader earlier that does banish itself very easily, but also something like Plague Spreader makes for a very, very nice target, including, something like Gold Suck, which you can, further use, guaranteed set this guy up, which is quite nice. As I Mirror Force my opponent for 2 here, Dim Alk here again gaining another 500, punching in for a solid 1800. Setting an Infernal Prodigy, another pretty cool card. For this period in time, just a side draw if your board is empty. Free specials are always nice, especially if I'm playing, a couple powerful main deck tributes, especially something like Kaius that benefit greatly from Infernal Prodigy. Do get to Honest the Shining here, barely making it out of that with a 300 difference, I believe, because the Skyscraper triggered. Yes, sir. And I find a Giant Trunade off the top here, which is pretty darn handy. Dim Alk once again banishing a card here, running into a Snowman Eater, which isn't too great as my opponent goes to, pop the Dim Alk here, as I add back a Kaius, trying to force out that last back row out of my opponent, because I'm not too worried about the Skyscraper, all things considered. Kaius once again just can't catch a break, always getting bottomless trap holds. It is what it is, but yeah. Oh god, is it gone dark. I do Giant Trunade here in the end phase. I was like, okay, I could have done this without, turning on the lights in my room, but I guess the sun just decided to fuck off for a moment. Giant Trunade here does allow me to drop down the Gauss on the follow-up, which is pretty nice, getting, that 2700 bungus as well as, pretty sizable token usually. Just goes quite nicely, as I'm reborn here for the Dimensional Alchemist, and a Gemini Spark comes down, taking care of Gauss. Of course, an incredibly powerful card for this era. And not only Gauss, but also the Gemini Spark, a very cool card. Setting the Starlight Road again, as Stratos hits the board, adds another Neos Alias. My opponent just kind of wanting to get in damage here. This is very fair, as my life points are getting quite low, but the Dim Alk does get to grab back another Kaius, which is quite nice. So that allows me to get in, with a decent push here on the follow-up here. This guy is a bit of a relic. Light Fairy is like a very weird thing here. Huge Starlight Rope, by the way, as I'm talking about Parshath here. Personally, I'm kind of still debating if I, want to maybe swap that guy out for like a Tethys Goddess of Light, which is like a slightly chunkier tribute, which is the main appeal, to be honest, because Parshath's 1900 does really start to fall flat a bit once you enter these, early 2010s, with, normal summons like Neos Alias in the format that easily contest the Parshath, which you just didn't have, a lot of in GOAT format back in the day. Now the Neos Alias comes down the follow-up, probably the previously added one of the Stratos to, take care of that Stardust Dragon with the Skyscraper boost. Do find another Caius here, which is quite nice, going after the back row, which is not a whole lot, not a bottomless trap hole this time, but I think we've also, we've only been through one. Oh, we've been through two, but with the two Caius on the board, this is a very easy game. But with that, let's move into another replay with this deck. I'm going first this time. Funnily enough, I think this is also against the Hero Loner. A pretty good grip. Set Sang and Pass is like a pretty good opener overall. Does get you to almost anything you'd want on the follow-up. As a, of course, a Neos Alias hits the board and the Sangan gets the run over. I do get to add the Infernal Prodigy. As mentioned, do quite like this card. But also, would have also liked to play Malicious Edge in combination with that, because Malicious Edge, I think, is a very niche but also interesting card for this period of time. Because it's very easily like a 2600 one tribute, which is just very rough to contest with. 2600 is just big enough to beat over a lot of the commonly played Suncrows in that era. But sadly, Malicious Edge just doesn't happen to be a Dark Fiend. Caius once again gets bottom list. I'm getting used to this by now. I think this is like the most common chain I've seen all event. Just stick a Caius, target a back row. It's bottomless. Cool. As I drop a Dark Hole here to get rid of Crusader of Endymion and the Neos Alias, deciding to Foolish Burial a Plague Spreader zombie before anything else happens after punching Nova Summoner. A very simple floater, realistically, just for the Dimensional Alchemist. Could also be playing Shining Angel in that slot. But Nova Summoner has a couple niche cases where it's just like a bit better than Shining Angel would be, mainly because Nova Summoner can summon in defense. And if you're playing against something that runs the Sanctuary in the sky, you could technically float into Parshath. But there's not a whole lot of decks around at this point in time, even with, this being a good couple of sets after Edison this event. This is the OCG's November 13th format, the day Storm of Ragnarok released, which 6 Sams with 3 Gateway. God, I'm very glad that not a whole lot of people decided to craft that for this event. Do Solemn Judgment of Warrior Lady here, mainly because I want to get the value of the Nova Summoner here, as I go right ahead and Plague Spreader the Nova Summoner off the board for a Synchro 6 here, which is going to be Brionac, because if this Brionac sticks, I can easily, discard the Dim Alk and get an N-Rise live, which would be quite lovely. But this way I just have to normal the Dim Alk, banish the top card, and then keep going from there. That Snowman Eater, by the way, once again proving to be a huge wall here, as my opponent goes to banish it and a Neos Alias from the graveyard to make the one, the only, absolute 0. Insanely annoying idiot to deal with in this format. Especially if you've gone through your Brionac, which is why I was like kind of panicking in this situation. But luckily, with the Dim Alk now in the graveyard, I do have 3 Light Fairies and a Dark Fiend in the graveyard, meaning I can banish 3 of those and the Dark Fiend. For N-Rise here, easily, forcing out the absolute 0 here. Setting the Nova Summoner, I think personally I could have set the Plague Spreader instead. Maybe work around a couple more removal spells, but Nova Summoner does not get punished here by a removal spell. Meaning I get another body for the follow-up here. And in the face of this Cyber Dragon, I'm very tempted to just, run out the Plague Spreader, because this way I do have the Plague Spreader engraved as a follow-up tribute material for a Caius potentially. Turning Plague Spreader and the Nova Summoner into Gaia Knight. We have Goyo Guardian at home, if you will. Beats over Stardust Dragon and is a generic 6. But because Goyo Guardian is errated in this event, it's, I think the best thing you can do as a generic 6, if you will. Which is kind of the downside to these events nowadays in Master Duel. While there are you know, great fun, of course. They don't really replicate the point in time because a lot of cards are errated. Caius takes care of the back row, and I get to swing in for game. But with that out of the way, I have a legal obligation to fulfill, so let's look at some Optronic gameplay. And we're going second. Incredible grip, by the way. Saffron, Scopen, and Slingen do go kind of crazy. Opponent goes to activate an Assault Beast here, which you might be laughing at. But Stardust Dragon Assault mode is not a laughing meta in a 2010, late 2010 context. Opponent goes to Dragon Ravine here, adds a Dux for the follow-up, sets a card face down, and passes on Malefic Stardust and Mistletoe. Giant Trunade kind of hoses that board. Insane top deck on my part there as I go to, you know, normal summon a Scopen, stick a level 4. We've seen these lines before. It is old school Optronic gameplay. Remember this. As Power 2 Dragon goes to reveal 3 copies, a double 2 C&D. Also an incredibly fun card with, you know, some pretty neat applications in this period of time. Specifically because it allows you to blank, you know, powerful sets like Super Nimble Mega Hamster, Raikou the Lightsworn Hunter, and Snowman Eater. Which, you know, also some of the Gravekeeper cards, which is quite nice. Opponent goes to Foolish Burial of Phalanx here because opponent of course wants to get into some synchro plays. Drops down another Dragon Ravine, discards the Atlas, adds a Legionnaire for the follow-up. Which is, you know, a tad bit better playing into a board as, you know, Dux would be. As, you know, the Phalanx comes down, I do Torrential here, as Power 2 Dragon is easily able to protect himself. And I can just kind of, you know, prevent my opponent from making another big idiot. Swap the Power 2 Dragon here in defense after dropping down and a card that I absolutely adore, but sadly just, you know, never really was quite there in Optronic map. Mainly because I want to have the bigger stat line in front, and I do not have a guaranteed search for a C&D anymore. Drop down a Remoten here, after, you know, of course, grabbing that Reaper unit off the Power 2 Dragon. Remoten here grabs me a Scopen, because I want that discard to bring back the Slingen, and then I can use the Slingen to, you know, throw that Saffron into a face-down Mirror Force, which is, of course, always a nice card to get rid of in these older formats. But with that, the second Power 2 Dragon has hit the board, Mr. President, and I do go for the 2 and 3, and I hit it. This could have probably also been, you know, a Lightning Warrior if I played like safer, or potentially also be like an X-Saber Bellum. But yeah, I get in for a sizable chunky and 3300, which is quite nice. Opponent goes to add another field spell in Dragon Ravine, and goes to normal summon that Legionnaire that we've seen last turn added. Equips the Atlas from the graveyard, Legionnaire targets the first Power 2 Dragon, and then Atlas gets to target the other one. Luckily enough, Power 2 Dragon has that very handy protection effect. As my opponent goes to discard another card, add a Dux for the follow-up, which is quite the potent card, but Mystical Space Typhoon is of course a crazy piece of interaction for that specifically. I do go for the deck thin here because I want to, you know, get that out of the deck before I Saffron here. Kind of increasing the odds, of course, a bit of hitting something nice. Don't hit anything though, not rewarded for the deck thinning, as I drop down the C&D that I hit in a 1 and 3. Sometimes you just gotta be that nice. So I'm feeling very confident in this situation. Not a whole lot can probably bring me off of you know, taking this game home here. Mystical Space Typhoon would have taken care of you know, equipping Phalanx. But Dragonidy Armor Leviathan hits the board. Of course, you know, forces out the protection effect of Power 2 Dragon here. And now I need to get kind of lucky. Of course, there's a good top deck, but there's also a very good reveal, which could be very funny at this point in time, and there it is. 1000 life points left, Borden off the top. Not a whole lot left to do except stick a Radion, get that additional Evolve counter on the map, and Saffron will strike for game for 1500. Yeah. It was just a lot of fun to, you know, just put this together and then just like get a couple quick games, and it did sort of well, but we'll talk about the deck list in a moment. Starting off with the Sky Scourge deck list. As mentioned before, a lot of, you know, the good stuff, Dark Fiends that are very handily good in this era, you know, stuff like Battle Fader, Sangan, Caius the Shadow Monarch, and, you know, the more Battle Faders like Gauze, the Emissary of Darkness, and Tragodia, kind of handily slotting into this. As mentioned, huge fan of Impermanent Prodigy in this time frame. It's handily a Dark Fiend. It's also free tribute fodder for, you know, a Parshath or a Caius, which is, you know, quite nice. Plague Spreader and Card Trooper are individually crazy cards. Plague Spreader specifically because we're running Foolish Burial, and Card Trooper is just a good way to load up on the graveyard. This man mainly was the inspiration to kind of build this and kind of form the basis for the Light Fairy portion of this. A great normal summon, usually you run this in like Archlord Christia, but I didn't want to, you know, just turbo into like a Floodgate, and this, you know, felt pretty fun. It's like kind of similar to Light Sworn, like a pseudo combo deck, you could say, you know. Just kind of tries to play good value cards for the time being, and then at one point you get to drop that one big bomb that kind of wins you the game. So sadly, the deck did lose a Return from the Different Dimension in this format, which is legal in Edison, which is quite funny, especially after you've resolved a Sky Scourge. Honest, of course, finds its space easily in the deck with, you know, Light Fairies being a part of the Air Knight Parshath. Is like currently my Light Fairy tribute of choice. As mentioned, you could also be spelling. Tethys, Goddess of Light, could also be your choice for the one tribute Light Fairy. Gets up to 2400, which is, you know, a very solid stat line. Contests Monarchs and stuff. And also isn't able to be beaten over very easily by most normal summons. And the effect's even quite handy. If you draw a fairy, you can reveal one of those, draw another card. Which can, you know, of course, get you very much deeper into your deck, which is quite nice. Then we have the Sky Scourges, Enrise and Noleras. These work pretty similar. You summon Enrise by banishing 3 Light Fairies and a Dark Fiend, as you saw. And Noleras is kind of the reverse. You special this guy by banishing 3 Light Fiends and 3 Dark Fiends and a Light Fairy. And then these are just the 2 of the original Chaos monsters. Enrise is Chaos Sork. You get to banish a monster a turn, but Enrise can't attack. And Noleras gets to pay 1,000 and, you know, reset the board, but you do get a draw, unlike the inspiration for this being CED, Chaos Emperor Dragon. The spell lineup is loads of power cards, essentially. Dark Hole, Monster Reborn, Giant Trunade, Foolish Burial. Goldsuck, as mentioned in the games, has some pretty neat synergies, is of course able to, you know, set you up nicely for those Sky Scourges, so you get those out of the deck, and have those ready at like a turn 3, turn 4, potentially, which is quite nice. And of course also works very well with the Dimensional Alchemist to speed up the process artificially. A lot of Darkness, just a good way to get deeper into your deck. 2 Mystical Space Typhoon, this format, funnily enough, has 2 legal, which is quite nice. We have a Burial from the Different Dimension, which is quite good at, you know, getting you those important banishes back into the graveyard, and the trap lineup is basically just power cards. Mirror Force, Render Tribute, and Solemn Judgment, accompanied by a Starlight Road. Not as good as in Edison, but still a very nice inclusion that I'm a huge fan of, especially into, you know, stuff like a Mirror Force, for example, or, you know, Torrential, of course. Extra deck, pretty standard stuff for the time being. Armory Arm. Most of this is not necessarily easily accessible. Mainly something you can potentially get into off of like a Reborn or something. But yeah, Armory Arm, Catastor, Magical Android, Brionac, Gaia Knight, Iron Chain Dragon, X-Saber, Urbalon, Black Rose Dragon, Lightning Warrior, Dark End Dragon, Colossal Fighter, Stardust Dragon, RDA, Avenging Knight Parshath, the fairly neat Synchronos deck can have access to. And of course, because it's legal in this format, and a massive, massive blowout, a Trishula Dragon of the Ice Barrier. Absolutely huge cards. Mostly you're accessing the 6s in this, sometimes the 7s, but the 6s are kind of, you know, where the sweet spot lies for this deck, since you can make those with, you know, stuff like Nova Summoner and Dimensional Alchemist. But with that, let's take a look at that Morphtronic deck list. Well, 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 it's been 16 years since, almost 16 years since they printed this silly little guy, and I'm still normal summoning him. But yeah, lineup is very reminiscent to my Edison list. I did kind of just adapt these for the format. From, you know, of course, Edison play. Morphtronic lineup is very straightforward. 3 Salphon, 3 Borden, 3 Remote, and 3 Scopen, 3 Radion, and 2 Slingen. This does give you a good handful of, like, solid reveals off of Salphon, especially if you machine dupe it. Good machine dupe targets like Borden and Remote, and if you have the right setup with, you know, a couple Morphtronics, specifically the Force and Grave. Because you do want a couple non-tuners if you machine dupe Remote, and sadly don't have Levier yet. Sangan's just pretty cool because Sangan can grab you any Morphtronic. None of these have a base attack value that is 1500 or higher. Radion gets over that if, you know, you stick it, but, you know, that doesn't care. Sangan doesn't care for adding it. Rest of the deck, of course, a lot of good cards. Dark Hole, Monster Reborn, and Giant Trunade. Specifically, Giant Trunade, very important to give you those opportunities to make big pushes, because you're, of course, looking to swarm the board with something like a Machine Duplication and end the game as fast as possible, because you do not have, you know, the grind game of value tools that a lot of the other decks in this format can afford to run. 1 for 1 just as an additional way to south one. You could probably also play like a Glow Up Bulb or like a Lantron to have like a level 1 tuner. To make this guy, which I think I forgot to cut actually, because I put this guy in the extra and then was like, okay, wait, Smartphone isn't in this format. But yeah, C&Ds here and Reaper units as targets for the Power Tool Dragon. 2 Morphtronic Map, mainly because I just like the card, but you could probably forgo Map and the 2 Econ that I threw in because they work quite well with it. Did run Dimensional Prison for a while in the space of Econ. Also a very good card for this. And then, you know, Mystica Space Typhoon and the power 1-off traps of Mirror Force, Torrential Judgment. Not a whole lot of other things to say on the extra deck here. Formula Synchron probably could be something else, but I couldn't be asked to like replace it at the moment. Could probably be like an X-Saber Bellum or like a Gaia Knight, the Force of the Earth if you want. Armory Arm could also be a 2-off in this. You do like the level 4 access because you can make it off like Southfawn and Remoten. Android is also a very good option because you can easily make a 6 off a you know, Scope and you summon off a Southfawn in defense. So that's maybe a change I'll do really quick here while no one's looking. Naturia Beast is here because, you know, it's great cards. And this is, funnily enough, one of the few decks that does get to make Post-Rada Goyo Guardian, which is quite a nice advantage, I'd say. Because Goyo Guardian is still an impressively powerful card. So yeah, otherwise, yeah, making Power to Dragon is still fun. And with all that out of the way, I think I won't wrap this one up. Yeah, let me know what you ran for this event. Of course, you know, a very nice way back in time. It's not quite Edison, but of course, these, you know, legacy format events are always just a nice breath of fresh air in Master Duel, and I'd really like to see these added. Maybe the Duel Room. Or, you know, just in general as, you know, an additional queue in the multiplayer mode as well. But yeah, let me know in the comments down below what decks you ran. And with all that off the way, I will thank you guys very much for watching. And I'll be seeing you guys again next time. But until then, goodbye.